So right about now, ladies and gentlemen, we have another review of the book, this time by Mr. Nick Devaux, who is St. Lucian. Again, he's going to join us by Zoom. And he's currently working on a project entitled The Logbook Project. It's a documentary of the 1942 attack at Castries. Mr. Devaux is also spearheading efforts to restore the propeller from the Lady Nelson, which is one of the ships attacked during the 1942 event in St. Lucia. So here now is Mr. Nick Devaux of St. Lucia.
Good evening to all distinguished colleagues over there in Dominica. It is such a pleasure and honor to join you here this evening. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So, as you mentioned, I am actually the founder of something called the Logbook Project, which was something that I just started about 10 years ago, just to try and capture some of the stories of World War II, not necessarily Caribbean-wise, but globally. And as I went along doing that, the propeller that you just mentioned was recovered from Castries Harbor in 2017. That propeller was torpedoed, blown off a ship called the Lady Nelson that was in the harbor one night when U-161 crept into Castries and torpedoed the Lady Nelson and another ship called the Amtata. And so because I was in this World War II space, I started to really look a lot closer at what happened in the Caribbean. And there's a story called the enormous turnip that some of us may know from childhood, where it's what started off as something based around a propeller head just grew and grew and grew the more I dug into it. And so over the last 10 years, yes, I too, without knowing of Mr. Richards or his wonderful book, was on a parallel path, if you will. And the more that I learned of this story, the more intrigued and the more it became obvious and apparent of the importance of the Caribbean as a geographic area and the contribution that West Indians made to World War II. So imagine my surprise when about 2 weeks ago, a mutual colleague of ours calls me up and says, "Hey Nick, a buddy of mine is about to launch a book, and I think you should meet him." And then I had the distinguished pleasure of meeting Mr. Richards, and I think we've spoken to each other a couple of times over the last 2 weeks. But I was equal parts amazed and pleased at this book that is so very important to be launched at this particular time. Sea Wolves in Warm Waters. As I think Mr. Christian made reference already, the breadth and the scope of the material to try and encapsulate the way he has done is truly impressive. I know because I've been in the belly of the beast for the last 10 years myself. So the amazing research he has done, and also his phrasing, which the last speaker spoke about. It is so easy to follow. It is an encourageable book, and I'm so happy to hear that these books are going to be provided in schools and so on, because I really, this story is so important to us as a people, as a Caribbean people, to understand our place and what really happened in these waters. So, Mr. Richards, I just want to salute you and thank you again for having me here tonight to join you. What I am actually working on is a documentary, and it's going to be called Oil and Ice Cream, because it will focus in a bit on the fact that this region, during the Second World War, the largest oil refineries in the world were based between Aruba and Curacao. And in Trinidad, you had the largest oil refinery in the British Empire. So that through our part of the world was oil that Britain desperately needed to remain in the fight against Germany. And it was critical that oil kept flowing up to America at that time. The other thing that was so critical coming out of this region was bauxite, coming out of the Guyanas. I think 65% of the bauxite used to manufacture planes was coming from this region. So we were absolutely vital And as Mr. Richards mentioned already, we were not on the periphery, but we were absolutely central. And it is so important for us. The other thing I'm so pleased about is that this book is written and told through the perspective of a fellow Caribbean islander. And the worst part about when you don't tell your own story is that somebody can jump in there and tell it for you and do a horrible job and make up their own narrative. And so again, Mr. Richards, I really want to salute you for the work you have done. It is a real pleasure to even be quoted in your book. And I really look forward to continuing, because the other important thing to note, ladies and gentlemen, is that this is actually just the first part of this story. More than 300 ships were sunk in the Caribbean region, in the southern Caribbean especially. And ships don't just disappear overnight. They rust and sit in the bottom of the ocean and can be there for decades. And what the research we are doing has now shown is that more than 20,000 ships were sunk during the Second World War all over the world. And many of these ships are leaking various toxins, including oil. And we have today in the Caribbean, our records indicate at least about 30 ships, tankers that went down full of oil. And while the rest of the world is at least looking into this problem in their local geographic areas, no studies have been done in the Caribbean. So part of what oil and ice cream will bring to the fore is this ecological ticking time bomb that we at a minimum need to come to terms with, to understand what is still down in the holds of those ships in our waters. So this, as I say, this is like an enormous turnip. There is so much to this story. There's the recognition of the sacrifices of the merchant marine sailors, but there's also the modern day legacy that we have to come to grips with. So again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.